Okay, so good evening. It's evening for everybody in one form or another, I think. My name is Quincy J. Allen. I'm a cross-genre author with a number of titles under my belt. This is for DragonCon, Digital DragonCon, the Drinking Fantasy panel, where hydration is important, but so is flavor. Let's focus a bit on the drinks, both boozy and not, for an hour. Sometimes what is in the glasses is as important as the glass itself. So what I want to do is, before we get started, have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us what you write and what your all-time favorite beverage is, because we can. I'm going to go with the order that's up on my upper screen here, and we'll start with Marie.
Hey, I'm Marie Whittaker. I am a cross-genre author as well. I am the creator of the Lola Hopscotch anti-bullying companion children's picture books, and then urban fantasy stuff. I have supernatural thrillers out and horrors out, and I've also started writing a little bit of science fiction, which has been a complete hoot. Yeah, I think that's it. I live in Manitou Springs, Colorado, and I'm watching a monsoon to my left here out my window.
All right, Rob, go ahead.
My name's Rob Howell, and shockingly, I too am a cross-genre author. I write mostly in fantasy, but also military science fiction, alternate history, and pretty much anything anybody asks me to write, because writing's fun and genres are fun. So yeah, my interest in this is I'm a big drinker of bourbons and IPAs. My favorite IPA is probably the Nickelbook IPA from Canada. That one of my favorites. So there you go.
All right, Tamsin, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry.
My name is Tamsin Silver, and I write fantasy. I write both urban fantasy and historical fantasy. I guess my favorite beverage, it's always been a wine, but since I moved to New Mexico, I've discovered I really love their white wines, and I've never been a white wine drinker, and that's sort of where I've ended up. And other than that, I do like a really good vodka martini.
Okay, next, Marc.
My name is Marc Allen Edelheit. I write epic fantasy and military science fiction. My favorite drink is Maker's Mark with Coke, which I have right here, and I'm enjoying. I have about 14 books published right now. All of them are bestsellers. I've been blessed. I've got really great readers. I just recently eclipsed 85 million page reads on Kindle Unlimited, and which is pretty awesome. And one of my series is currently in development for a TV show, and I'm super excited about that. I just can't wait for Hollywood to get back to work.
Hold your breath.
Right?
And the pilot's already been written, so I've been really blessed, and I've been published in 2015. So it's just a wonderful experience, and I'm really gonna miss DragonCon this year. And prior to the panel, we were talking about this is our first free Labor Day in God knows how long, but
Yeah.
We miss you all.
Yeah.
All right, Darin, you're up.
Hey, Darin Kennedy from Charlotte, North Carolina. My day job is family physician, but I write novels at night, and I write paranormal thriller and contemporary fantasy, and I like a glass of Prosecco with dinner.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Lovely.
So for the record, this is actually Kentucky Mule. It's my favorite mixed drink. We make these a lot at home from scratch, sort of. We don't make the bourbon, of course. All right, so based on that, seeing as this is a drinking panel, I wanted to actually raise a glass to everybody and to Digital DragonCon, to Siska, who arranged all of this, and to everybody who won't be able to make it to DragonCon this year. Everybody raise a glass.
Cheers.
DragonCon.
Cheers.
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 Come back.
Kampai. Prost. Gudam. What love?
Cool.
There it is. The first question I have is, what is the most obvious drink you have deliberately written into a story, and was it a plot device or just world building / setting fluff? Go ahead and speak up if you have one. Let's see how that works.
I've written in sour wine, poor wine, basically, for the Legionaries in my series. And in real life, Legionaries received a ration of wine. However, it was very watered down and very vinegary. And, one of the reasons that they believe that there's the wine region in Bordeaux today is because of the Roman legions. And I did a lot of research on them for my books because I dropped Roman legionaries in a fantasy setting. Just couldn't have them without having the wine. So that intentionally went into the book. And Quincy, in all the fair disclosure, Quincy and I have written a book together, Reclaiming Honor, and we've got the next one, Forging Destiny, which is sitting on my desk, which I'm guilty and I need to get my ass on it, Quincy.
Holding my breath.
And I've just got, as Quincy knows, I've got just too much on my plate right now. I'm having the kids home with COVID-19 and no summer camp. It's eating up a lot of time. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it with the wine.
Who else? Anyone?
So in Marc the Necromancer, it is a kind of a little bit of a plot device. Sabrina, dies on page 1 and wakes up a vampire, and she's very confused. And she's not your typical, but of course she has to drink blood. Her roommate is a chef, and her roommate, who's human, discovers a way to flavor and make pig's blood taste better so that they can drink that. And so she's always whipping up new batches of coffee flavor, and this is dessert flavor, and this, so it becomes this comedic part of the story and they keep it in the special fridge, and people might suddenly show up and they reach in, they're like, you don't want that, that's a bad idea. So it just seemed like a really funny idea to have her make different flavors. The caffeinated coffee one is my favorite because they're like, I'm dragging, and so they have coffee blood. So yeah, I that's one of the ones that I definitely built into it. And if they want alcohol versions, in Windfire, someone in book, I think 5 or 6, they want to get drunk and they really can't. They're like, we need to go to a bar where there's a lot of drunk humans. I got to drink one.
Tamsin, when they ask you, how do you take your coffee blood? Do you say red?
Well, they have this. I learned this thing. They have this thing called red gravy. Red gravy.
Yeah, it's fine.
Gravy with coffee in it. I haven't had it yet, but apparently it's a thing in the South.
Wow.
It's slowly being acclimated.
My kids, we have flavors, and they have flavored water all the time. That's kind of like that. You need to add that into your story, buying the flavored waters and adding it to the blood.
Just a little bit of blood here. It's fine.
Go with grape or fruit punch blood.
Little Neha.
Anyone else?
So in my setting of a town of Akrita, I built that town around the town of Ohrid in Macedonia because I was there for an archaeological dig. And while I talk about one of the main characters brewing beer, the 2 interesting drinks that I have from that I really enjoy writing about are rakia, which is the brandy of the Balkans, and it can come in a variety of flavors depending upon the fruit it's made from. And then one of the interesting things about Ohrid is it's right next to one of the deepest freshwater lakes in the world, and you can take a cruise out and see the sights of the lake. It's quite beautiful, but the lake water is incredibly cold and delicious. And they have mugs on these boats that you can just dip into the lake. And I remember that as such a vivid thing. And so it's interesting to me. It's just water, but it's really neat water. And that sort of plays into some of the magic that happens for some of the other things.
Anyone else? Darin?
I was going to say the only real appearance of alcohol is in my Fugue and Fable series. When Mira's had a bad day, she likes a glass of red wine. So red wine obviously makes many appearances in this series over here because she has many bad days.
I have one about hard cider. So my protagonist, Tessa, is over in London, and she's from Austin, Texas, so she hasn't done a whole lot of drinking because she's only 20. But she's studying abroad, and she goes into one of the pubs, and turns out the bartender is one of the players in the book, and he gives her apple cider. His name is Adam. And so it's kind of got this little biblical thing right there, but he doesn't really tell her that it's hard apple cider. It's actually Strongbow, and it's the first time she's had it. So that kind of sets up the thing between those 2 characters.
There's two I've done. One is in the Blood War Chronicles stuff. Jake Lassiter, he's the protagonist. He's a gunslinger. And his father was actually the inventor of Captain Platt beer. There's a sort of backstory. Somebody I dated a number of years ago, she's a graphic artist. She actually did the beer bottle for it somewhere. The artwork, I think, is on my page somewhere. But it's a platypus in a pirate outfit in the Captain Morgan pose. And so it's really a cool label. It really was neat. So that's actually, and that'll come back up. It's mentioned a couple of times in the book. And then there's a recent short story being turned into a novel where the one of the main characters, they make this. It's I forget the name of it now because I haven't written it for a while. But they make this. It's like the equivalent of whiskey, but it's not. It's made from a root on a different planet, and it's really popular. And so that's how he's incredibly rich because of his booze. And so that's the source of him being able to sort of do all the stuff he wants. It's like the rich billionaire, but it's because of booze, which I think is just kind of cool. Anything else on that subject? Okay, so this is not fiction related, but so I want to know who my fellow addicts are. So when it comes to coffee, are you clean, an occasional partaker, a regular user, or a full-blown junkie like myself?
On what?
Junkie.
I missed. On what item?
Coffee.
Oh, coffee.
Did you say cocaine?
I wasn't sure what you said.
Coffee
It
is so
blinked
much
out on
cheaper
my
than
side, and I was like, what am I about to admit to?
It's a trap. Yeah,
It's a
coffee.
trap.
So who are my coffee drinkers?
Me. I'm an addict. Junkie.
All right, addicts. Darin?
I get a headache in the afternoon if I don't have one in the morning. What does that mean?
That's an
Yeah,
addict.
we're in the same boat.
But only
I
one a
like-
day.
I like my tea like you most people like their coffee. I'm very Scottish, and so I like my tea pretty much black. And then I add just a little bit of milk, a little bit of sugar, but I like really strong black tea, so it's close.
Rob?
I live with a coffee addict. I don't actually drink coffee. I buy coffee for her, and then I will have it in ice cream. Culver's has this midnight toffee chocolate ice cream, which is quite good. But
Okay, that does sound
drinking
good.
the stuff, not so much.
Oh, I love it. I do.
I don't like the taste of coffee. I feel like I don't belong here.
I
You and me
love
both,
coffee.
Tamsin. We'll stand up to the masses.
As Quincy knows, I don't sleep much. I work all the time, basically. I drink coffee like it's water, and every once in a while I'll need a break from that, and I'll go into withdrawal, and it's like. But
Yeah,
I don't take it with cream. I take it black with just sugar, like an alcoholic. So go figure.
Around here, so again, thanks to Vicky, I discovered Puerto Rican coffee. And started with Cafe
good shit.
Bustelo, which I recommend. It's really cheap and it's really good. Now we're drinking La Llave, which is a Puerto Rican coffee, and so if you do that, it's fantastic.
I know all about that coffee, considering I used to live in a Puerto Rican Dominican neighborhood.
Oh, yes, that's good stuff. That is.
Mhm.
So when I ran in my other life, I ran a health insurance company, and one of my employees was Cuban, and we were in Boca Raton, Florida, and every morning he would come in and he would make Cuban coffee, and I would get some of that Cuban coffee. It's really small, and it's like all you need is a one shot of that, and you're good for the day. And it literally comes as a shot, and
Yeah,
he used to make
that's right.
the best Cuban coffee ever.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. If you haven't had it, I recommend it. And
Yeah.
unless you have health issues, in which case don't, because it could give you a quick heart attack if it's too cold.
The best cup of coffee I ever had was in Ecuador. We were all in this room, and they would come in and pour about a half-inch of sludge in the bottom of the cup, and then they would pour in some steamed milk on top of it. And when I say this stuff was like, bing, lights are on, that was some awesome stuff.
Yeah,
That reminds me.
I got to try that.
A lot of people in the United States don't realize that they're drinking stale coffee, and that you can order fresh coffee and it tastes completely different. Like if you go to Italy or France or wherever and you get coffee there, the coffee tastes very different than it does here in the United States. And I try to, with COVID, it's pretty hard right now, but if I ever get a chance to support local coffee grow, the local coffee sellers where they support the local coffee growers in whatever country. The fresh coffee tastes so different. It's so much richer. And it's got so much more caffeine in it. It's better. But I just, that's one of the things that I can't get my hands on right now and I miss.
A buddy of mine in the SCA has done a bunch of research on Turkish coffees, and he's been hunting through, and he's the archaeologist I actually went to Macedonia with, and he's hunted through a bunch of the providers that he can find in the Middle East for stuff that's the oldest kind of continuous blend. And every once in a while, he will come out and he will do the entire Turkish coffee setup with the, with the
Oh, wow.
brass platter and the little, I don't, like I say, drink coffee very often, but that ceremony is so kind of neat that it's fun to participate in.
They take their coffee very seriously over there.
Yep.
It's almost a religion. So we actually have a fan question that's come in. Can drinks be used to illustrate a character's social standing? Now, Marc touched on that a little bit, but elaborate. I think that's a really good question. Go ahead and chime in.
Yeah, it can be used as a social drink. Different types of, and in my books where the officers who are nobility, they're the equivalent of Roman legionaries in a fantasy setting. The officers will they'll try some poor wine and just be revolted by it. And the men, the common rank and file, they won't know different. They don't notice the difference, and they'll just guzzle the stuff. Whereas the officers, the nobility, they'll buy it for its taste, its quality, where it's made, and they'll sip it. And that's pretty common. What you see in like when you do your research in Roman, like the Roman legions, people in the Middle Ages, they would guzzle the wine. It would be very watered down because the common person couldn't afford good quality wine. They would go to a tavern or something like that, and the wine would be very watered down. And people who knew the difference and could afford the difference, they would always say, "Bring me the best," or "Bring me the best of what you got." It would still be watered down in some of those taverns. And you can actually read history books where the actual person writing it talks about the different qualities of wine and what they get and their favorite and stuff like that, compared to what the common person has. So yes, in a novel, it can definitely be used to differentiate social class, status, whatever, and should be, because it just adds richness to the story.
Yeah. I agree with so if it's contemporary setting and you're wanting to really draw a character, you can have somebody, sitting in a recliner and just guzzling cheap beer. I don't know if you want to name it like Coors Light or whatever. I don't know if you want to name that stuff, but that would be another indicator of some kind of a social standing or at least some sort of an attitude.
Or generic beer. I'm reminded of college.
Yeah.
David Drake does an interesting reversal of this in the Lieutenant Leary series. Lieutenant Leary grows up in a very rich family and he knows the good stuff, but because of the way he's raised and because of the way he interacts with the lower class sailors in his on his ship, he ends up drinking the cheap stuff with them, and it gets him sort of in with them. And so while Marc's absolutely right, we should use it, and it's absolutely an identifier of class, it can also be used by people to sort of shift their perceptions. I mean, we do it here now naturally, but they would do it too. Our characters would do it too.
Well, yeah, it can be used as a gateway into a social structure, right? I mean, so if you have it's been used in, most I've seen in like detective series and so forth, but the fellow who actually was in MASH, as I recall, maybe, I don't know if anybody remembers this. So it's the era of Winchester, and there's this guy who comes in and he starts talking about the proper wines and the proper place to vacation and stuff, and Winchester's all getting snooty. And this guy literally outclasses him and then presents to him that he is a bloody butler. And it's a marvelous scene where you see this knowledge, true knowledge of, is it cognoscenti? Is that the word? Effeteness, taking you to take down a character in a story because he thinks he knows something that he actually doesn't. So, I mean, it's, as a plot technique, it can be used very effectively.
As you said, it can be also used to to help your character fit in with the people he's
Exactly.
around. And so there's so many different techniques you can use as a writer to make things be more believable in the story. And it's definitely one of them. I suggest that you try to taste what your character is going to drink. So if you're writing like in a fantasy setting and it's mead, maybe you want to order mead and try it, and so that you can better write about it. So
how we love mead.
Yes, and
Me too. I'm actually just fixing to make some.
But the mead that they drank in the Middle Ages is very different than the mead that we drink today. And you can order what they drank, and it tastes very different. It's what they enjoyed, we may not enjoy. Like the Romans, they had this sauce that they put on everything, and it was like their ketchup. It was called garum, and it's fermented fish sauce. Okay, it is the nastiest stuff you can possibly think.
Hey guys, you probably had it.
Yes.
You probably had the modern version. Marc's about to tell us the modern version, I bet.
Yeah, Thai fish sauce.
Or Worcestershire.
Well,
Worcestershire sauce is
that the modern version?
Yeah.
That has fish in it?
Because I know.
Yes.
I
don't use either of those, so yay.
I'm allergic to fish, so I know it has fish in it.
Any place you've had fish sauce.
Yeah.
And you probably loved it.
Yeah,
Well,
Worcestershire has anchovies in it.
I don't think I loved it.
I don't think I loved it.
But the Romans used to put it on everything.
Darin went to go get some.
It smelled so god awful that archaeologists today, when they dig up the remains of like amphora, they can smell it and tell if garum was held in it. So like 2,000 years later, they're still.
It is a little old.
In this bottle of Worcestershire sauce, it does say anchovies. So there are, in fact, fish in this.
You got it.
Yeah. I
doing
found
with
out
that photo right there beside your
because of
desk.
Worcestershire.
Oh, he left. You may have seen it. He went to go get it.
Oh.
I teleported.
That's research. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question. If you were to write an ever full tankard, cup, or glass into one of your stories, what would it be? What would it be full of? And what story would it go into? Let's start on the right this time. Marie.
Oh, let's see. If it was ever full, I think something that would be cool, maybe something like from the Fountain of Youth. Maybe you could keep drinking from the Fountain of Youth if you made it to a certain point in a story, and that's got to be like an epic story, epic fantasy something, like a hero's journey quest type story. I guess that's just like from the hip, that's what I had.
What would you say, Rob?
Like the Grail from Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty epic quest, just like what you were talking about, Marie.
You have chosen wisely.
That's like a classic line in one of those movies. Like if you think back on some of the classic lines out of movies, that's one of them. You have chosen wisely. You've chosen poorly.
Oh, actually, you chose poorly.
Delivered so well. Delivery was awesome.
Anyone else? Tamsin.
I don't know. I can't think of anything that I've never used drink. I mean, other than obviously playing around with flavors of blood, which is awkward to talk about in a way. Other than that, I've never really made any beverage, like any kind of glass of something really important. I've used other things, but I haven't done
margarita
that.
bread or something like that.
No, I haven't. I think there's a scene though where once I wanted to show that she was really petty, and she had like a Manhattan and she threw it in his face, and the whole reason she went and got it was so she could do that. But that I haven't. She was like, well, if I'm going to throw something in his face, it's going to be a Manhattan, because she's kind of a ditzy blonde socialite from Connecticut. So, but I've never had it be like. And that might change though, because the next thing I'm working on is in the late 1800s in London and Ireland. So that could change.
I have to
It better
say,
be
if I
whiskey.
were writing vampires, I would totally write the kind of blood and sort of specialty versions of the blood. Like this is an 1863 Irishman. I really enjoy this particular vintage kind of thing, because if you're going to live forever, you want to try them all, right?
Right, you want to try all the
I
different
would.
types of blood.
I
Yeah.
haven't had that Chinese guy yet.
Making note. And if I don't drink too much of this, I'll remember that note.
There you go. Use a OneNote. It works for everything.
Your story.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I in my stories, I intentionally put coffee in them.
Go Tamsin, go.
Yeah, and my main character, he loves coffee. He doesn't get it very often, but he loves it, and it drives some of my readers nuts because they're like, Romans didn't have coffee. Well, this takes place on an alien world. It's fantasy. It doesn't take place in Rome, so it's one of the ways that I use to differentiate my world from the actual world in which we live in, where the ancient Romans lived in. So, a lot of my readers get it, and some of my hardcore Roman history fans, they love to complain about it, and it
I love to complain about it.
yes, it's
keep
the
them
kind of
reading.
reader that I've got because I've blended. I created a whole new category that Amazon set up, where I took Roman legionaries and put them in a fantasy setting in military, so I've really combined people's two areas of things that people really love. There's a whole genre of Roman legionary fiction stories, and then I combined it with elves, dragons, dwarves, and magic and all that good stuff, and it just works really well. So every once in a while I'll get like technical readers that know everything about the Roman Empire, and I know a lot because I've done a lot of research. And when I first started writing, somebody wrote me, and they had a doctorate in Roman history, and they'd written like several books, like serious books that are like bestseller books for history on ancient Rome. And I'll leave their name out of it. And they wrote me after I'd written my first book and said, it really irritates me, or really takes me out of the story every time I read your story that the character goes ahead and mentions seconds. They didn't have any way to measure seconds. They had minutes, but no way to measure seconds. And it hit me, and it was like one of those things that I had to do research on to find out she was right. So I went back and fixed it. But so Quincy may notice in the books that we write that and we've talked about this, Quincy, where I've changed it from seconds to I've had to have another way to measure those, something less than a minute,
Heartbeats or something.
heartbeats, or you waited a moment, or a
Moment.
prolonged moment.
Yeah.
Moment is
Like
a
that,
great
so-
I
word.
actually had to change my thinking on that. I mean, now it's habit. I don't think you'll find a second in that whole book that I turned in.
But in the first one, it was there.
It was everywhere.
It was like it's just one of those things. But
Yeah, you got to change your thought paradigm. It's kind of interesting.
Oh yeah.
Anyone else on the whole tankard glass, whatever, full of something, and what story?
I would do a caramel high rise from Caribou, and the story I would write it into as my eternal cup is the story of my life, and that's
Right on. Well, I know Marc won't let me put an ever full tankard of mead in the Tovok series.
I won't. Why not?
Well, so that's it. Book 3, it's going in.
there you go.
But we're writing about dwarves, so you got to write about spirits too. I mean, come on. You can't have a book without dwarven spirits, right?
Agreed, right? That's what they do is they drink.
I think they've already had wine in that book, haven't they?
There's wine, and then they actually do. I've mentioned mead and ale.
And ale. You got to throw in
Yeah, and I
spirits.
think it's mostly ale in that.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. So when you're dealing with world building, how do you determine, or do you determine, what sort of is the staple libation for a culture, a people, a region? I mean, does anybody do world building that deeply? And if so, where have you done it?
I had to research what they would drink when I was working on Billy the Kid. Even though it's a fantasy historical, I wanted to make sure. And there's a lot of actually stuff that talks about how Billy didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He didn't do all those stuff. And I was like, well, he's gonna maybe have a drink in mind. Yeah, they actually had bottled beer. And the only way I found out is I read that there was a point where the beer bottles were stacked so high in the back area of the Tunstall store in the corral that they used that to climb up and out. That they used this huge pile of beer bottles. And when I read that, I was like, oh, so they had beer bottles. I thought maybe they just were pouring it, or, because there was a lot of, almost everyone had some sort of saloon. Like you'd have your store and your saloon. Like that was an average. There was more than one in town. But when I read about all the bottles, I was like, oh, so they can get a bottle of beer. So
it was not
if you think about it, Tamsin,
not carbonated in the same way.
There wasn't a whole lot to do back then. There was no internet, no TV,
So they drank.
No, just a lot of booze and a lot of gunpowder and
cow tipping and stampeding.
Oh, it sounds like so much fun.
If you ever want to get amazed, go look at the amount of alcohol drunk per person in the United States and follow it. In the 1800s, the amount of alcohol drunk by one person on average in a given year is immense. It will boggle your mind because
I think it's still anywhere near
that.
Don't you think
Hang
it's still?
I'm here for just a second. I got to shake up a shaker.
Your whole screen is wiggling.
Well, I really don't want to know today.
I don't know what's going on.
It's not a shaker.
I didn't know we were doing an impromptu shake weight commercial, but that's awesome.
Yeah. See, I'm not the only one who thought that.
So
Gotcha.
Kentucky Mules very seriously, as one should. And yes, that's going into a store.
In all honesty, Quincy, though, if you're going to create a culture and you're going to have them have alcohol as something they can drink, like it's not an alien species that can't drink.
Yeah.
Every human culture I'm aware of that has any special drink, whether it's alcoholic or not, has built rituals around when to drink it and ceremonies around how and when to use certain parts of it. So if you're not doing that, you're wasting an opportunity, because these ceremonies are great scenes that we can write when our characters interact, and maybe two cultures get together and maybe they're struggling to communicate, and drinks are maybe the way to get that started.
That's so true. Like if you think about the Japanese tea ceremony or whatnot, it just adds richness to the world. Like you look at the Mongols, they used to drink fermented cow's milk, and I've tasted that and wouldn't want that ever.
This is not my favorite friend either.
Yeah, no. So, but you don't, as a writer, you don't want to forget the little details that make that world richer. Because the richer you make it, if your reader can come away from learning something, it makes it that much more engaging, and basically the reader dives into the story, into the depth, the richness. And as you said, if you're not doing that, you're missing an opportunity.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I guess one thing would be, how much does your world diverge from our world? Is it the same list of alcoholic beverages that we already have, or the further afield you go, do they make alcohol out of something completely different? Or if it's alien, do they have fermented, make up a name for something? So, I mean, it kind of depends on how close or how far away you are from our own experience to determine what you're going to do as well.
I think from a world building perspective, it's critical. I mean, if it's a carbon copy of sort of human civilization, modern day, then you'll see the recognizable whiskeys, gins, broad vodkas, etc. But if you want to take it that extra step, then creating something new absolutely has value, and then building your story around that notion, I think adds weight, adds a depth to the story that you wouldn't otherwise get, because it's something that I'll say most readers can associate with in one form or another, right? Either pro or even cons. And so there's a sense of, if you're dealing with we'll say a puritanical society, then the notion of a libation of any kind would be abhorrent. And that can be written into the story. And then they could be in opposition to a society where, you know, they actually revel in it, right? I mean, there's this notion of how we treat with altered states of consciousness done willfully, and whether we do it, right? I mean, that's certainly world building, in my opinion, anyway. Sure.
Yep. I do a lot of urban fantasy, so I tend to go along with what's going on regionally, which can be a lot of fun too, because you do a lot of research to see, you know, what went on in a certain time period or something like that. So I bring a lot of that in historically sometimes. I don't know.
So in Italy, you're not going to see a lot of Scotch, as an example.
Yep.
Well, distillation is an interesting question. We generally assume that distillation only starts in the 1400s or so, but the Bulgarians a Bulgarian archaeologist says he found rakia from the 11th century, and so that's now starting to get maybe pushed back, because rakia, like I say, is just a fruit brandy. Now, he had some reasons to do that, because he was trying to prove that rakia came from Bulgaria as opposed to Macedonia or all the other ones in that area. But it's an interesting question. And so if you are saying I'm writing medieval fantasy and I'm writing it as of, say, 1066, well, as the historical fantasy writers here know, then we have to really be very careful about adding something that is distilled. Can't add tomatoes.
You'll get called on that.
Yeah, can't add tomatoes, can't add a lot of peppers, can't add a lot of potatoes, can't add potatoes, a lot of other things that are sort of New World kind of things. But if you want to stretch it, and if you're talking the 13 or 1400s, there's actually a huge shift in what becomes available in medieval Europe at that time. And again, I'm talking Eurocentric kind of things here. Obviously, if you're writing something that's derived from the Bhagavad Gita and is Indian subcontinent, then of course you've got a completely different set of things that maybe the Eurocentric stuff doesn't translate over. So, but I mean, I'm a medieval historian by training, so these are the kinds of things that I always concentrate on when I'm world building, because that's basically getting to write the worlds that I would have researched otherwise.
Yeah. Anything else on that particular topic? Okay. So here's another one, and now the question is going to be, what's a drink from trick fiction that you'd like to try? But as I've thought about that one, I want to back that up a bit. Is it just me, or is there more specific drinks mentioned in science fiction than in fantasy? I mean, is that just me, or is that somebody? Am I crazy?
No, I think you're right about that.
Right.
Yeah. Earl Grey, hot.
Now, one Star Trek fan here.
Oh, no,
So when I submitted my first novel to my editor said back, "Oh my God, you actually write food." I wrote the set. I could say the particular setting is the Balkans. I researched medieval Balkan foods, and I put them in there. And so when someone could cook, they were cooking medieval Balkan recipes, clearly named. And I have the recipes, and someday I'll put them all in a book, you know, like we do. And I think that's true. And I tried to do that with the alcohols too. But her comment to me was so striking, and I never realized it, but I like food so much, so it was easy for me to go past it. And her comment was, it wasn't a stew. Like, how many times in fantasy do we see someone eating a stew at their camp or something like that? Yeah. And, you know, that may or may not be the easiest thing to make. And so food, which actually is really important to the magic, to regaining magic in my setting, and different foods help wizards regain their magic. Livers are really important, for example.
What does barbecue do?
It's meat, so it's tasty. You know, the higher protein means more magic. Actually, is sort of a way to do it. But so for me, it was very important for me to have food to be delineated well and described. And I do that with alcohols too. And I don't think it's done as much in fantasy as it is in science fiction. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I thought it certainly is peculiar, because generally you find more sort of at-length descriptions, greater detail frequently on the fantasy side than you do on the sci-fi side. I mean, there's exceptions to that, certainly. But, you know, and fantasy is renowned for the brick by brick descriptions of ruins, as an example. And yet, and I was, you know, pulling my hair trying to think of a fantasy drink that, you know, would be, it was one that I'd like to try. You know, I mean, so in most of them, if it's a liquid, it's a poultice, it's a potion or what have you. Darin, go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe when you're doing fantasy, a lot of times, not contemporary fantasy, but what we think of as like just regular fantasy, it's sort of in the past, and we sort of go with your mead or your ale, and it sort of stays very generic, whereas science fiction tends to be looking forward, and we have all gone to the bar and seen like the list of 400 different drinks, and so someone's like, well, it's a futuristic setting. Someone's going to say they want this drink or that drink. So maybe it's just more specific because science fiction looks forward and fantasy looks back. Do you think that might be a part of it?
Yeah, I think more of what it is that a lot of the drinks that people have in fantasy worlds, it's more ancient drinks, more older drinks, and you have to describe it more so that the modern reader can understand what they're enjoying. When it comes to science fiction, I think the menu is greater, and you have more freedom and choice of what you can have made. And like on Star Trek, where it's like you got the replicator, it's like, hey, I want tea, Earl Grey, hot, you know, whatever, 83 degrees centigrade, or whatever. And it suddenly appears. So, you know, I think you have more freedom in science fiction, but when you go to fantasy, you have to describe more of what your character is drinking. Like if they're drinking piss poor wine, like we were talking about earlier, well, what does that taste like? Well, it's watered down. They've added vinegar to it, so it's very bitter. And the average person, when they drink it, they're not going to like sip it and go, this is really good. They're just going to down it for the alcohol content and guzzle it, basically. When they come across like really good wine, that behavior is ingrained. So they're going to do the same thing. And that's an opportunity for you to have one of your refined characters, one of your noblemen, look at them like, that's meant for sipping. That's not meant for, you know, like guzzling. And so, I mean, it's two different worlds you're looking at.
One of the things that I didn't realize I guess it's fantasy, but it's also historical fantasy. And had you guys ever seen what the tea actually looked like when they threw it into the Boston Harbor?
No.
It's a brick.
It's a brick.
So, so the tea that Billy and them would have, so the brick is about this big, and you shave off, and it's pressed dried leaves, and you have to shave it off into your hot water. It's kind of like how they make cowboy coffee, which is they take the grounds and they throw them into a pot of hot water. I had to do tons of research on both food and on like just drinking regular beverages for that time period. And I was walking around one of the things that they do out in Lincoln, and I walked past and they had this block. And since I'm a big tea connoisseur, I was like, what the heck is that? Like, that's tea. I'm like, shut up. What? And they're like, yeah, and this would have been what they threw into the harbor back during the war. It wasn't tea bags, it was blocks of tea. And you could live a year. Like sometimes that block of tea was like, could last you 6 months to a year. It's a serious size.
Yeah, because a lot of the people would go ahead and basically, you know, recycle the tea leaves that they used.
Yeah, so they could.
Yeah, but you're right with those blocks. You could brain something with those blocks because they were dried, they were compressed, they were hardened, and they're
easy to take with you.
Yeah, the East India Tea Company.
The volume of the ship, the volume of the ship would have been huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to see sort of a modern example, if you go to a tea store or an Asian mart and look for bullet tea, literally it's just these little, they're like pellets. So I'm sure it's probably a similar process. And then you drop a couple of those in your cup of tea, they expand enormously. They're really condensed. So it's something.
I've never tried that, Quincy. I'm going to have to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And Tamsin, I didn't know that. That's really cool to learn. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I have tons of useless knowledge from the past.
But it's that useless knowledge that makes you a more effective writer.
Yeah, I was just about to say
because you can drop that into a story and it's suddenly believable, you know? It adds believability.
Yep.
I've been in the SCA for over 20 years now, and I find bits and pieces of the SCA material culture that I can drop into stories all the time that I'm like, I didn't even realize I ever picked that up, but oh yeah, that's what, and then, yeah.
I think all authors accumulate useless knowledge that can be used at one point. That art is.
Yeah.
So true.
Chock full.
So, folks, we are at about, well, now 4 minutes now. So I wanted to just go through and have each person sort of let everyone know again who you are and where they can find you, and your books, not necessarily where they can find you at home because stalkers suck. So we'll go down sort of the list again. Darin this time.
Sure. My website's DarinKennedy.com. It's about to get a big overhaul this weekend if everything goes as planned. And I'm easy to find on Amazon, and come check out my books.
Rob.
I'm Rob Howell, Howell, www.robhowell.org. And I am so excited because this afternoon, before we got here, I finished the final battle and started the epilogue of my next novel, and it's going to my editor on Friday. And I am so close. 2 years of working on this one has taught me step by step. I'm so happy that this one is finally getting to the editor and moving on.
Yay.
Woo!
I know, right?
Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Marie Whittaker. You can find me at mariewhitaker.com or Amazon, or my books are available on wide distribution, so Barnes & Noble and all the rest of them.
Tamsin.
You can find my stuff at tamsinsilver.com. Also Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of that. Actually, of the Billy the Kid, The Curse of Billy the Kid just came out. Book 2 comes out in a couple weeks. And I am one scene away from finishing book 3, y'all. One scene away. I'm so freaking excited. Anyway, so The Murder Cricket Kugler is almost ready for the editor. So, but yeah, tamsinsilver.com is where you can find me, and skyofthedamned.com. I have a web series out that you can see, and there's books that support it.
And Marc.
My name is Marc Allen Edelheit. I'm an Amazon author. You can actually find me on Amazon, largest bookstore in the world. I love them. It's one of my favorite companies. You can also find me at my website at maenovels.com. That's marcallenedelheitnovels.com, maenovels.com. I've got a new book coming out on August 28th, book 3 in the Karis Saga, which is the first compact. Quincy and I have a book coming out shortly, probably December, I would guess. Maybe November. It's Flex. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's Way of the Legend. It's book 2 in that series, which it's a really great story. And you can also find some of my other series like Chronicles of an Imperial Legionary Officer, and you can find me on Amazon or my website. So.
And I am, of course, J. Allen, cross-genre author. You can find me on Amazon. My website is quincyallen.com because I'm clever. And so I wanted to thank everybody here, Marie, Darin, Rob, Tamsin, Marc, and Cisco for putting it all together. Thank you all so much. And to everybody watching, if you watch, we love you in a friendly, cordial, non-physical sort of way. Take care, everybody. Love you.
Love you, man.